I think it's about time for me to try out a new headless CMS. So in this video, I'm going to check out GraphCMS and combine it with Next.js to build a static website for my Learning Quick streams. Let's get into it. What's up, everyone? If you're new to the channel, my name is James Quick, and I do weekly videos on web development related topics, and I spend lots of time in the Jamstack using headless CMSs, using static site generators or dynamic page generators, or a combination of both with something like Next.js. I like React. And in this video, I'm going to try out a new headless CMS in GraphCMS. Now, this is a sponsored video by GraphCMS, but I'm really excited to check this out and create some data inside of their dashboard, create schemas, and then consume that in a GraphQL format inside of a Next.js application to build out a static site for the details associated with my Learning Quick streams. Did I mention that I'm on Twitch at James Q Quick every Friday? Check it out. All right, so let's go ahead and head into the dashboard so we can get started. All right, so I'm on the landing page for GraphCMS, and sure, you can have the cookies. So let me go ahead and log in, and I have already logged in with my GitHub account, so it's just gonna kind of take me here. And I've got a couple of test projects in here from testing this stuff out, as you might imagine. And let's go ahead and create a new project that's gonna be blank. And we'll call this JQQLQ for Learning Quick, and this is my Learning Quick space, whatever. And then I am on the East Coast in the United States, so I'll use the US East and North Virginia and go ahead and create this project. Now, while this is loading up, I'll show you a little bit of what I'm actually talking about. So on the current version of my site, which is going to be getting updated sometime soon, on the streams, you can see like these are all the episodes of Learning Quick. So there's another one coming up actually tomorrow after creating this with Jessica Chan. And then I'm talking about Supabase and careers and passion and all sorts of what I consider to be really fun stuff. So back inside of GraphCMS, we're trying to kind of replicate that data so that we can consume it in Next.js. So I'm going to choose a free tier here. There's plenty of freeness in the free tier for me to use. So 5,000 content entries. I only have like 50 content entries. 100 gigabytes of asset traffic. 1 million API calls. I'm not planning on getting anywhere near that. So this free forever should work perfectly well for me. Kind of cool here that they have invites for team members. So this is kind of something you'll find in some headless CMSs for free and some not. So it's kind of cool here. I don't need to invite anyone. So I'll start here, and they kind of walk you through like what to do to get started. So the first thing is probably what you would expect is to actually set up the schema. So I'm going to set up the schema for the actual stream. So if I look at a model, let's go ahead and create one. And this is going to be a Learning Quick stream. And then the ID on here, we'll just call this stream. And then the pluralized version of this would be streams. I guess we need to capitalize that like this. All right. So this is a collection of is that a thing? Collection of Learning Quick stream details. I don't know, whatever. So go ahead and create that model. And now we're going to need to add data. So what's the data that we're going to need in here? Well, we're going to need a title for the stream. We'll need a date with a time for the stream. We'll need a cover image. We'll need the guest name and then a description, like just a kind of a block of text to write whatever we want to about this. Now, right now, these details are stored inside of Airtable. So when I have someone fill out a form for coming onto a little behind the scenes stuff there for my streams, it sends me this record and they send me all the details that I need about them. So we'll use a couple of these as an example. So let's go back over to GraphCMS. The first thing we'll do is a single line of text. So we'll just go over here and click these fields. I really like that this is a nice GUI for adding the fields to your schema. So we'll call this title. This is the title. I don't think we need a description. It's pretty self-explanatory. We'll use this as the title of the field. This is going to display this field's value instead of the ID in relationships. That way it gives you a little bit better understanding of what record it's actually pointing to. Cool thing in here, they've got validation. So yes, we want this to be required. Yeah, we probably want it to be unique. We don't need to necessarily limit the character count or anything like that. And we don't need to set an initial value. So we'll just go ahead and create that. And then we'll want a date field. So I'm going to scroll down to date and time because I want to have the time of the stream, not just the date. That's important. So we'll call this stream date. Again, pretty self-explanatory. We'll also mark this as required. Those could probably be unique as well because I can't stream 2 places at one time. I'm pretty good at streaming, but I'm not quite that good. Whatever. All right, and then a cool thing that we can add in here is an asset picker. And this is going to be for the cover image. So we'll add the cover image in here. We'll have validation to make sure this is required. And we'll be able to pick an asset from the stuff that's inside of GraphCMS that stores our assets for us. Pretty neat. And the last 2 things, we'll need a regular field here as well for a single text. This will be guest name, and we'll make this required as well. And then lastly, we will have a description. Now, this will be in the format of the rich text. This is a text editor with formatting, if I can speak English. So this will be just a description, and we'll mark this field as required as well, which is nice. All right, so with when that finishes, now we have our model. Now we can actually create a couple of pieces of data. So let's start with one of these. We'll do like 2 of these. I won't waste a bunch of your time just typing in information. This first one is like going full time with content creation with Jessica Chan, for example. Oh, I just realized the other thing we might need is a slug. We'll come back to that. This is going to be Friday the 3rd, and then they also have the time picker in here. So this is going to be at 11. It's kind of an interesting time picker, 11 a.m. We'll add a cover image. So I'm going to go and grab the cover image from the site. Will it let me paste this in at existing cover image? We'll need to upload. Can I paste it in here? Not quite. Looks like the paste didn't work. All right, so let me go and save this image. We'll call this content creation in our downloads folder. And then we'll go and upload this thing inside of GraphCMS. So inside of our downloads folder, we'll go to content creation and we'll upload that file. Now notice when that's finished, this image is marked as a draft. So the image itself has to be published as well. We'll come back to that in a second. So Jessica Chan here. And then inside of the text, now we can add whatever sort of description we want. And I'll give the Coder. You should go check her out on YouTube and Twitter. But I'll go ahead and grab her Twitter handle, her link. And we can add kind of the basic things you would expect inside of this formatted text thing. I can say Jessica Chan is joining to talk about content creation. And then I could do like a header 2 and say social media and follow Jessica Chan on Twitter. And inside of here, I could do a link maybe to her Twitter. Now this doesn't need to be like, oh, tooltips, that's nice. This doesn't need to be like super in depth, just so you've got the basic things here. You could do list items, you could do images, the basic stuff that you're used to in like formatted text inside of some sort of editor. So we'll want to make sure that we save and publish this. This is going to ask us, hey, this image is not yet published. So we want to check that as well. So we'll publish the image, which will allow us to publish the record. And now this data would be live. Now I'm not going to go through and like enter a bunch of these things. I think that's good just for like demo purposes, just show you what's there. The one thing we did mention though, is we might want a slug property. So this is a URL friendly version that we're going to use for the paths of our streams, the individual landing pages. So we'll call this the slug description, and we'll say generate slug from template, yes. And then we'll get this from the, oh, this is kind of cool where you can do this, this little string interpolation in here. So we'll do this as the title. Oh, it gives you IntelliSense, that's nice. So yeah, this is just gonna be the title in a slugified version. Those titles should be unique, which should make this slug, or should let this slug work out really well. All right, so that is created. We've got our model, the only one that we need, and then we've got our one piece of data. And now we can go to the API playground, and I'm kind of curious here. This is GraphCMS. This is based on GraphQL, which means I could write in a query here, and I could say all stream, or if I just say stream, sorry, just the pluralized version of that. And then if I wanted to query the title here, I could get the title. And if I wanted, I'm not sure exactly what the format is for the slug. Is it a property directly? Looks like the slug isn't defined. That's because I haven't added it. So this is a great test. Let's go back to our content inside of this record. Let's edit this and let us generate this slug. So regenerate button right there, nice and easy. Save and publish that. Cool. So we've got that slug set up for that, and we should be good to go. So if we go back to our playground, if we run this query again, we'll see that that slug is showing up. So that's perfect. So we're able to query the information about it. The other pieces of information that we'll want is the stream date and the cover image. I wonder what sort of format those things will be in. It's making me query the ID here for the cover image. And what's cool is if I hold down Command and click on this cover image, it will show me the schema here for that asset. And with that pulled up, we can see this is a type of asset. And if I go into there, I can see all the different fields and things that I can work with, including there should be a property down here of URL. So I can query, not the ID of the image, I don't really care about that, but the URL, which is what I want to be able to display the image. So there's that actual image there. So is there any other, I guess we'll also need, and one of the tips here is you can just type A and now you get all these different things pre-populated for you to show you what's there. So we'll want to make sure that we get the guest name, we have the stream date, we have the title slug, stream date, and lastly, we want the description. And description is going to take some sort of field. So we'll take the raw here. It's kind of cool that you can also get markdown out of that as well. But this raw stuff we'll be able to use to generate HTML on our end as well. So you could do either the markdown or the raw here. And we'll see that in a second. All right, so that looks good. Now we can move over to Next.js and start to put all this stuff together in our Next.js application. But the last thing we'll have to do before we do that is go into our project and find out what the URL is to make these GraphQL requests. Let's go into our endpoints, and here is the content API. So we'll want to make sure that we use this content API to be able to query that data. So that's what we're going to do. So I've got a new Next.js project created here. There's not going to be anything in it. Now, the one thing I'm going to use to make GraphQL queries is Apollo client. So let's look at this on Apollo client npm. I'm curious what other packages you may use for doing GraphQL. So let me know that in the comments below. But this is the one that I'm going to start with. So I will install npm install, and I think this is at Apollo and then client. So we'll go ahead and install that package. While this is installing, I can go ahead and set up a little bit of helper. So I'm just going to copy in something over here. What we'll do is we'll create a new file called Apollo client.js. And what this is going to do is just configure a new Apollo client, and we're going to paste in that URL for the GraphQL endpoint from GraphCMS. So let's go and grab that again to make sure we have it. So this content API, we'll click to copy that, and then we'll throw it into this API. And now we have GraphQL kind of ready to display. So let's go into our index page in GraphQL. I'm not going to worry about all the details of in here. We're not going to worry about making this super pretty either. So we'll say this is content. This is going to be learning quick streams. That stuff doesn't really matter. And then we'll put an H1 that says learning quick. We don't need image here. And then we're also not going to use any of the styles that come with us in Next.js. So we'll just have learning quick. And now what we want to do is on the home page, basically create landing or links to the individual pages for the items. So let's do an npm run dev here to get this started. Is port 3000 is already in use. Maybe I should kill the existing stuff that I have. All right, so now I can run the npm run dev. That should start this thing up, and we'll just see a basic Next.js project starting here. All right, so there is our learning quick. Now let's start to actually query this stuff inside of our homepage. So with this homepage, what we want to do is to be able to use the get static props from Next.js to be able to query all this information and statically pull it in at build time and display it on this page. So we'll do export async function get static props. And then inside of here, we want to actually go and get those streams. So let's go back to our GraphQL API and let's just copy this query. And then we're going to use our client to be able to query this stuff. So we want to pull in GQL, which comes from that Apollo client. And then we also want to pull in the client that we created ourselves. So if we look at these auto imports, yes, I know it's kind of fancy. I cheated. It did it for me. But it pulls in GraphQL from Apollo client, and then it pulls in the client thingy that we just created that represents our connection to the GraphQL API in GraphCMS. All right, so this thing will return to us something that has data inside of it, hopefully. And we will await, we'll say client.query. And then inside of that, what are we gonna pass? Well, we're gonna pass a query parameter, which uses GQL and then these template literal tags. So inside of these template literal tags, now we can actually write that query, which means I can now copy in this query that we got from GraphCMS. Is this gonna do any auto formatting for me? Maybe not. So let's tab this over twice. And so what we're doing is saying from streams, we're going to query the title, slug, stream date, cover image, guest name, and description. And we're going to get all that information. So hopefully that is all the data that we need. Let's go ahead and log out that data here. And then lastly, from here, we need to return this data as props to the component that we're on, which in this case is the home page. So we're going to return an object that has an object of props. Inside of that object, we're going to have this data, which I will rename or alias as streams. So we'll rename that to streams. We'll rename it there. We'll pass this in as our props. So that will pass in as streams, which then means inside of the component above, we can now destructure streams and hopefully log this out on the front end as well. That was a lot of code. Fingers crossed that any of that works. We'll take a look at this in a second. So let's go to the home page that we have. Let's just do a refresh and see what happens. Cannot find module GraphQL. Well, that's because we forgot to install one additional dependency, which is GraphQL. So let's do an npm install of GraphQL. We'll let that run. We'll restart it, and hopefully now we'll be able to see some data coming through. All right, we'll start this back up. All right, now we're getting this error that's saying not allowed. So we need to make sure that GraphCMS is configured. So we need to make sure GraphCMS is configured to be able to accept public requests in this case. All right, so if I come back to the settings tab here, there's a public content API here, and we'll need to set this for us to be able to access these this data publicly without making, or these are going to be unauthenticated requests. They're not going to be authenticated. So they've got a button here to initialize defaults. I say we just do that. Hopefully this will take care of it for us, and then we'll be able to make our queries on this data ourselves. All right, so hopefully this will allow all read access or read on all models, which should be good for the publish stage. So we've published that thing. Let's now try, can we do a refresh on this page? Will it restart that? Hopefully it did. Now that it's configured, if we go into the console, do we see the data coming back? We see streams, and then we see the actual information that we want. So that's looking good. So this comes back as inside of here, I think I renamed data to streams. Actually, what we want to do is, since this query here is called, or we're querying streams, it's going to come back as a property called streams on data. So we can then say const streams equals data. We can destructure that from our data. And in this case, we should basically get the exact same thing. All right, so if we log this out, now we get an array with all the information that we want inside of those streams. So if we were to, inside of here, if we were to do an unordered list, and then we wanted to iterate through each one of these streams and create a link to each one, we could use our streams.map. And that means we'll take each stream, and what are we gonna return in here? Well, we will return a list item, and that item will be an anchor tag, and that anchor tag will have a text of stream.title. We'll have an href of stream.slug. All right, and then we'll need a key in here for each one of these so we can kind of cheat and use the index of the array. So if we grab the I parameter, now we can do key equals I, and that should get rid of that warning. Let's see what we got if we do that. Refresh this page. So there's our list item. This is a link. And if you look at what it links to, it links directly to localhost 3000 / and then the name of the article, which is the slugified version with the dashes and stuff. Now, the one other thing we can do in here is instead of just linking directly to / and then the slug, we may want to prefix this with something. So we could do, if we use ES6 template literals here, we could use this as a variable and then just prefix this with /streams. So this would now link to /streams / and then where we want to go. So this is really kind of small in the bottom there, but in the bottom corner, you can see this is linking to, actually I can just pull it up. It's linking to /streams / going full time with content creation with Jessica Chan. Now you notice that this page also doesn't exist, so we need to figure that out. So what we're going to do is we will create a, inside of our pages directory, we'll create a folder for streams, and then we'll create a dynamic route. So this dynamic route says it goes in brackets with kind of a spread operator here. And we're going to say we need a property inside of here called the slug. So all of these pages that we're going to create are going to be built on top of the slug. So that's going to be the URL that we're accessing this thing at. So I just had a little snippet here to generate a React snippet, and we'll call this the stream page. And then we'll have two functions in this one that we're going to need to work with. We're going to have get static paths. So let's export async function, get static paths. And this is the thing that we're going to use to go and get all the different paths for the different posts. And then when we have each of those, then we'll be able to use export async function, get static props. And what get static props will do is query the information for that given stream based on the slug to then pass those properties into the page to be able to display the information on the page, all statically at build time. It's pretty cool stuff. All right, so this query in here is going to look actually very similar to what we did on this index page. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this. So we'll copy this over into our get static paths. And we really don't care about all this information. Really, all we care about inside of here is the slug. So we'll just grab the slug for each one of the streams. And then we want to use the streams that are in there, and we want to convert that to an array of objects that have a params property that then has a slug property. All right, so what this is going to look like is we'll say that our path is going to be, we'll take our streams, we'll do a map, we'll get a reference to each one, and then we want to return an object. That object will have one key, which is params, which will point to another object. And that thing will have a property of slug, which comes from the stream.slug. All right. And then lastly, we want to return paths and not have a fallback. So we'll set that to false. So this path is basically going to be an array of objects that has a parameter called params. And then we'll pass in a key of slug. Notice that matches what this dynamic parameter is here in the route with that ... syntax, which means we're going to create a page at /stream/slug for each one of these different streams that we have. All right, let's try to log out our paths. All right, and let's just see if that is working. So let's try to refresh this page. We see await. Did we not mark this function as async? No, we didn't import all of our stuff. So we'll need to import the client again. We'll also need to import the GraphQL. All right, so now let's give this a refresh and see if we're able to get those paths. All right, so now the thing, all right, so that is pulling in the information correctly. You see we've got an array of objects with a property param that has the slug, and we have the slug inside of there. So now it's giving us an issue though of formatting inside of here that we want this property, this stream.slug, to be in an array. So we can just wrap this in an array syntax. So now we're saying we're going to take that slug and put it directly inside of an array, and we'll see now if it's okay with those paths. Okay, so it looks like it's good with the get static paths. So we're able to figure out each one of those paths. Now, based on that path, we want to go and actually get the individual stream to pass all those details in the component. So this is for generating the individual page URLs. This is for getting the information for the individual pages for those streams. All right, a little bit tricky here in Next.js, but it's kind of cool how this all works. So I'm going to, let's actually copy again. Let's copy if I have this in my clipboard. Let's go ahead and query this stream one more time. So we're going to query streams, but now we're going to do this slightly differently. And I'm going to get some more room on the screen here. All right, so make this a little bit bigger. We're going to query stream here, but we're going to query it by the actual slug. So if we look inside of our get static props, it's going to take in a params parameter. That params, if we do this correctly, that params parameter will basically be what was up here. So it will have a slug property, which means we can grab the slug from params. And then we want to use that slug to actually make that query. And since this was an array, if you remember, we'll do params.slug of 0, and then we'll just get rid of the destructure syntax in here. And we'll open this up. All right, a little bit better formatting. So we're going to query this data, and we want to query where this property is matching the slug that we just got. So we can do that by passing in a property of variables after this query. So after this query, we'll pass in a variables, and this thing will be our slug. All right, so that we're going to pass in there, and then we'll define our query, which is for stream. We're going to define that to take in a parameter of what we'll call slug, and then it will be of type string, and it's required. So we'll want to make sure that we're passing that in there. And then lastly, as we make the streams, now we're going to say this is going to be where the slug property that we're looking for is going to equal the slug property that we pass in. All right, so we're passing in an object of variables that has a key value pair of slug that comes from the params for this page. We pass that into our query. We say that we can also call this stream by slug or something, just to give this a better name. So this is going to take in a property of slug, which is of type string, and it's required. And then under streams, we're going to pass that in. So we want to query the streams where the slug property of a given stream has to equal the slug property that we're actually passing in. All right, and hopefully what this will return to us is that individual stream. So if we destructure the stream here, we could log this out. And then we can even get, and we may be better off, well, we can do it like this. And we can also say that the stream is streams at 0. So we'll get that first stream, and we can log out streams and stream. Probably just need 1 if that will work. And then lastly, just like we would in our previous example of get static props, we need to return this back to the component. So we'll say return props, and then we'll pass in the key value pair of stream. Now, if you haven't seen this before, I haven't clarified, this is a little syntax here that is a shorthand for this. So if the key and the value are the same name, you can just pass in the key like this. All right, so we've able to get all the paths up here. We pass that in to get static props. Now we grab that slug, and hopefully this query will query GraphQL for that specific one. Oh, it looks like we might have some red over here, so let's give this a shot. All right, so we've got an error here that comes back from Apollo. All right, so let's take a look and see if we can figure out what's going on there. And after a little bit of stumbling around, I realized that we can just do a direct string comparison here for slug. So we don't need that equal. So we want to say the slug equals that string directly. Since it's just a string, it's a little bit simpler here. So let's actually try to refresh this page now. Hopefully we're able to query this data. Do we see it logged down here? We do, which means it should be passed into this page. So we can get this at the stream. And then inside of here, we can have an H1 for the stream.title. All right, so let's take a look at that. So there is the title. Then we can have the image, and we can use the Nextjs. And we can use just an image tag here and say the source is going to come from stream.coverimage.url. And then the alt will be cover stream.title cover image. Let's see if that shows us an image here. All right, so there's the image. It's really big. We could use the Next.js image component, which is what it's asking us to do here. We could do that, but we'd have to set up a little bit of configuration to be able to pull these images from GraphCMS. Not something I think we need to cover today, but it's able to pull that information appropriately. I'm going to comment that out for now. The last thing we want to do is use the raw stuff from the stream description. So if we take stream description and then take raw, let's just see what this outputs. Objects are not valid as a React child. That's because this is actually an object of all the different components and things that are inside of that raw. So we need some way to convert this raw stuff that comes from GraphCMS into our project that we can display. So I found this article, Working with GraphCMS Rich Text Field. I'll put a link to this in the description so you can look at some more details. But it gets down into, if you're querying text, you can actually get the raw, which is what we've done, or you could get HTML directly. Let's actually take a look at if we were to query this HTML directly. From the description, we could get the HTML. And if we wanted to render the HTML in here, we could do this. But if we come over, I think React is going to give us an issue because we're not setting this stuff. Oh, there we go. Actually, it just inputs this stuff as a string. So if we wanted this to be inside or actually displayed as HTML instead of just an HTML string there, we could use dangerously set inner HTML in React. And I never know the syntax of this right offhand. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this is. Basically, what this is saying is like, do you trust that this component this HTML that you're going to render is actually valid and safe? And in this case, we'll just assume that we do. So this is going to be coming from that same thing that we just did. So this is going to be stream.description.html. So this should now allow us to render that raw HTML onto our page. And it actually takes one little bit of formatting. So inside of here, you'll have an HTML property or HTML key that then has the string as its associated property. So I have to make sure we match that format. So now let's go back and you see that this is able to display all of this stuff, including the link to Twitter. So it's got the Twitter link here. It's got the H2. So this is a way that you can take that raw HTML right out of the input from GraphCMS and use it that way. You can also, if we scroll down here, there's a couple of different options. You could grab Markdown. So if you had some sort of Markdown transformer, you could do that. So you could get HTML, Markdown, you could get just regular text, which is probably not very helpful. And then you can also, if you grab that raw stuff, you can customize the way these things are displayed. So if you were to build a serializer for the different pieces of information, you could say, hey, this render element function for these different types of children, if it's a quote, if it's a link, generate them in this way. So that way you can have full control over how you display that stuff. But in this case, we just took the raw HTML and displayed that directly to the page. So if we go back to the home page, we can see, if we go back to home page right here, and we click on one of these, this should now take us to that secondary page. That's pretty cool. So that works. Also, one of the things we could have done is inside of this home page, instead of doing an anchor tag, we could have used the Next.js link tag. So we'll need to import this, import link from next/link. So this will be a little bit more optimal. If we go back to the home page, it's basically going to do like some preloading on this page, and this should load faster now without having to do a full refresh of the page. So that's cool. And then just to show how this would work, if we were to come back into our data, into our content, and can we duplicate one of these? Let's see if we can duplicate this. Looks like we can't duplicate. So let's actually just do another one of these. Let's pull this upcoming one with Supabase. I'm going to download this image. All right. And then we'll create a new record inside of here. So we'll create a new item. We'll say this is going to be Supabase stuff. This is going to be at some point in the future. That time is fine. We'll add a cover image in here. So we'll upload a new one. We'll need to make sure we publish that as well. So there's the new image. Guest name is John Myers. John is super cool, whatever. Notice this slug is already specified for us, so that's kind of cool. Looks like it didn't take our date time, maybe because we didn't choose a time. So we'll just say, okay. All right, there we go. And then we'll publish this, and we'll publish the asset along with it. And what is cool is from here, now, if we were to refresh our homepage on our Next.js app, we should now see if we do, I don't know if we need to restart the server. We may need to kill it so it'll query everything again because it's already kind of up and running. So let's rerun this again. All of that static stuff happens at build time. So this needs to run through one additional build process to be able to get this updated information. Hopefully we see two links here, which takes me to the right page. And you see this HTML is being displayed appropriately, which is pretty neat. So that is GraphCMS connected to Next.js, creating static pages and pulling in data with GraphQL and Apollo client. I think it all works pretty well. I'm curious what you think of GraphCMS. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed it, if you want to check it out. Appreciate you watching the video, and I'll catch you next time.